the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Without objection, members will be recognized in order of committee seniority for questioning witnesses today. This will make it easier for me to ensure all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. I want to welcome everybody to today's Economic Opportunity Subcommittee hearing, where we are reviewing 16 pieces of legislation. Today, our subcommittee will again consider bills and drafts that span our jurisdiction. And I thank my friend, the ranking member, Mr. Moore, our staff, and our VSO partners for their work. And as always, in our subcommittee for working together in a bipartisan manner. As always, we have several proposals related to VA education benefits. We'll be looking at expanding the Veterans Success on Campus program to tribal colleges and universities, increasing transparency and searchability of key information on the GI Bill comparison tool, modernizing VA's IT system for educational claims processing. That's a subject near and dear to my heart. And extending the time limit for use of education benefits when an institution closes due to an emergency. We'll review two proposals related to the Survivors and Dependents Educational Assistance Program, including eliminating the time period of eligibility for benefits and ensuring that institutions only charge in-state tuition for those using the program. We'll also examine legislation to continue the practice known as rounding out, which allows students in their final term to round out their schedule with non-required courses to achieve full-time status. As you may know from our recent hearing with the Secretary, I was very concerned when I heard that VA announced it would cease this practice, which could cut monthly housing allowances and education benefits for thousands of GI Bill students, impacting their ability to meet their living expenses. And that's why I'm encouraged by the communications that I've had with the VBA these last 2 weeks. I thank them very much. And I believe strongly that we are finding a resolution that will work for the VA and will work for student veterans as well. And I thank our VSOs for participating in those discussions also. However, our committee is committed to considering all options available to protect students from this financial burden, which is why this bill remains on the agenda today. We also have several proposals related to veteran employment. We'll be looking at Mr. Norcross's bill to expand transitioning service members and veterans access to information regarding registered apprenticeships, as well as Mr. Cicilline's bill to protect service member employment rights in the workplace related to arbitration agreements. We'll also look at proposals to increase the authorization of appropriations for the Vet Tech program and to direct the Department of Labor to carry out a short-term fellowship pilot program for veterans. We'll be reviewing proposals related to the issue of homelessness, which has been and will continue to be a great focus of this subcommittee. This includes directing VA to study the use and efficacy of credit and financial counseling for those veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness, as well as expanding VA's authority to assist veterans in acquiring permanent housing. We'll look at my draft legislation, which requires the VA home loan program to factor a home's energy savings into a veteran's debt-to-income ratio when the veteran provides an energy efficiency report for the home that they are purchasing. This would increase the veteran's buying power when purchasing a home with a decreased environmental footprint, a win-win for veterans and for our planet. It would build on VA's energy efficient mortgage program, which provides loans to cover the cost of making new energy efficiency improvements to a home. We'll also look at a proposal to enable eligible service-connected veterans to use their adapted automobile benefit every 10 years, and for a percentage of this benefit to be expanded to include veterans with non-service-connected disabilities. This proposal also codifies many VA policies that consider vehicle modifications as medical services. Lastly, we'll receive feedback on the VETOP Act, which I was glad to introduce with Representative Wenstrup yesterday. This bill would create a fourth administration at the VA, named the Veterans Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration, to streamline the provision of economic resources to veterans. And I'm grateful to work with Representative Wenstrup on that bill. Clearly, we have a lot to cover today, so I will conclude my comments here, and I'll recognize my friend, Ranking Member Moore, for any opening remarks he may wish to make. To the Ranking Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for continuing the bipartisan tradition of this subcommittee by bringing 16 bills before us today. including many Republican proposals. I appreciate your efforts, and I hope we handle our work in a bipartisan way. While I'm generally supportive of the goals and intentions of the bills before us, I do have some questions about several drafting and technical aspects, and I hope we can gain clarity on some of that today. I would note that several of the bills on the agenda would require significant mandatory pay-go offsets to be identified and applied before they could gain my full support or pass the House. I would like to briefly touch on two of the bills on the agenda that I introduced earlier this week. I was proud to work with Mr. Tron and Senators Moran and Tester to introduce my bill, HR 2457. That's the Colonel John McHugh Tuition Fairness and Survivors Act. This bill would require GI eligible schools to extend in-state tuition benefits to beneficiaries of the Dependents Education Assistance Program. This program provides funding for higher education for survivors and dependents of certain service members who died on active duty and were later found to be 100% service-connected disabled or died of service-connected disability. This change would bring the rules for this program in line with the post-9/11 GI Bill and the common sense solution to help our heroes and families meet their higher education goals. The short title honors the legacy of U.S. Colonel John McHugh, who was killed in action in 2010 by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. The McHugh family now lives in my district, and I'm grateful that they have allowed us to remember his service in this way. It is certainly the least we can do. My other bill on the agenda today is HR 2420, which would require a series of reports to provide needed oversight of the VA's new digital GI Bill project. I was pleased to hear the VA recently awarded a contract to modernize VA's ancient systems for processing GI Bill claims. However, with almost every major upgrade to the GI Bill program in the last 15 years, there have been subsequent IT failures. The most recent failure occurred in 2017, which led to delays in housing payments for thousands of student veterans. While the VA entering into this contract is a step in the right direction, we still have to have a full accounting of the life cycle costs and objectives of this program. My bill would require VA to submit a base level report that provides information on costs associated to the outcomes of processing times and would require subsequent reports to ensure that there is full transparency on the VA or not. On track, I'm sorry. Ultimately, my bill follows the old adage, trust but verify. I'm also supportive of other GOP bills on the agenda, including Dr. Winstrup's bill to create a fourth administration at the VA, Mr. Cawthorn's bill to create a corporate fellowship for veterans at the Department of Labor, Ms. Mace's bill to eliminate the expiration of benefits under the Dependents Education Assistance Program, Dr. Miller Meek's bill to extend funding for the popular and successful Vet Tech pilot program, and Mr. Mann's legislation to use unused VA-owned properties for housing homeless veterans. I know there are also several bills that have been proposed, including my bill, HR 2047, that would expand eligibility for GI Bill benefits to certain members of the National Guard. I know the chairman has a similar bill, and I hope that in our next legislative hearing, we can consider those bills and find a way to cohesively expand benefits to those dedicated men and women. Mr. Chairman, I do want to raise concern with the text of the Justice for Service Members Act. While I understand the goal of the legislation is to strengthen USERA, I'm concerned that it's just an attempt by some to include service members in their campaign to eliminate all arbitration agreements and force service members into legal systems. As our economy continues to recover COVID-19, we should be encouraging corporate America to hire members of the National Guard. I fear this legislation will make it unjustly more difficult. Finally, I would like to take a moment and congratulate Mr. Cawthorn on tying the knot over the break to his wonderful bride, Christina. So congratulations, Madison. And Madison, please give her my condolences when you see her. And seriously, I wish you guys many years of happiness. I thank our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to our discussion on how to improve the bills pending before us today. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Moore, and congrats to Representative Cawthorn. And I look forward to continuing the bipartisan work of this subcommittee that we started last Congress with my dear friend Gus Bilirakis, and looking forward to working with you, Ranking Member Moore, in a similar way for the benefit of all our veterans. I am excited to see a number of our wonderful colleagues here. And for our first panel today, we're going to hear from members sponsoring bills on today's agenda. So I'd like to call up Representatives Gallego, Mann, Sherrill, Mace, Cawthorn, Miller Meeks, Wenstrup, and Cicilline to all join our first panel. What a panel. Wow.
Thank you.
You're each going to have 5 minutes. And I'll start with my friend, Representative Ruben Gallego of the great state of Arizona. You are now recognized.
Thank you. And can you hear me, just to confirm?
Loud and clear.
Well, thank you, Chairman Levin and Ranking Member Moore, for including the bipartisan Native Vet Success at Tribal Colleges and Universities Act in this hearing. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today about this important bill. Native Americans and Alaska Natives have a long and courageous history of service to this nation. From the Revolutionary War to the famous Navajo Code Talkers World War II, the sacrifices of Native Americans have been integral to the success of the United States military. I have even had the honor of serving side by side with Native American Marines during the war in Iraq. And although Native Americans volunteered to serve our country at higher rates than any other demographic group, they have the lowest rates of VA benefit utilization. This must change. Last year, I successfully got 2 bills signed into law that would improve Native veterans' ability to access healthcare benefits. Today, the committee will consider my bill to improve VA education and career support for Native veterans attending tribal colleges and universities. Amid a pandemic that has disproportionately impacted the health and economic development of tribal nations, it is more important than ever that we ensure Native veterans have the support they need for economic and personal success. My bill would station full-time VA staff at tribal colleges to help transitioning veterans and service members complete their education and prepare for the labor market. We've done this at universities across the nation. I had a VA staffer at my college that helped me with my GI Bill through the Vet Success on Campus program with great results. It's now past time to do this in underserved Native American communities. By expanding Vet Success programs to tribal colleges, we ensure that Native veteran students have access to, among other services, adjustment counseling to help veterans complete education programs and ultimately secure employment, vocational testing services, educational and career counseling, expedited veteran readiness and employment services, and referrals to our VA medical centers, community-based outpatient clinics, or vet centers. These services could be the key to graduation, employment, health, and future success for this group of veterans. Passing the Native Vet Success at Tribal Colleges and Universities Act is an important step towards keeping our promise to Native American veterans and expanding the reach of an already successful vocational program at the VA. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses here today and continuing to work with my colleagues on this important legislation. Now I yield back.
Thank you so much. The gentleman from Kansas, Representative Mann, you are now recognized.
Can you hear me okay, Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of this subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to highlight legislation Representative Pappas and I introduced aiming at helping veteran homelessness. The Affordable Housing for Homeless Veterans Act of 2021 would increase the number of affordable housing options, especially in high-cost areas, to help reduce the recent uptick in veteran homelessness due to the pandemic. Our job on the Veterans Affairs Committee is to ensure we are taking care of and doing right by our veterans. This legislation works to do just that by curbing veteran homelessness and ensuring our nation's heroes are not without shelter for themselves and their families is the top priority for me, and I know is true for others on the committee. As VA Secretary McDonough and Housing and Urban Development Secretary Fudge stated in a release this week, there are over 37,000 veterans experience homelessness in America. This is unacceptable for our veterans, and we must be part of the solution in Congress and in the administration. I was just pleased to see that the Department of VA and HUD align efforts and join forces to find ways to end veteran homelessness. One of the priorities mentioned by VA and HUD is increasing the supply and access to affordable housing. The Affordable Housing for Homeless Veterans Act reauthorizes and amends a program that allows the Secretary of the VA to sell, lease, rent, or donate a home which was acquired by VA because a veteran defaulted on their VA guaranteed home loan to a public housing authority, grant and per diem provider, or a supportive services for veterans families, SFVF service provider. The public housing authority or providers could then use these homes as vouchers for permanent housing and shelter veterans and their families who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. By reauthorizing this program and removing some burdensome regulations from the old program, the number of affordable housing options in higher cost areas will increase and provide relief to veterans who have limited housing options. I was pleased this legislation received bipartisan support from my colleagues on the committee, including, as I mentioned earlier, Representative Pappas and also Representative Cawthorn, as well as members of the committee. other members of the committee. This broad support shows a willingness by the House of Representatives to implement these small but impactful changes for our veterans across the country. I also had the opportunity to speak with VA Secretary McDonough last Friday when he visited VA facilities in Kansas. I spoke to him about the Affordable Housing for Homeless Veterans Act, and he was encouraged about the work we are doing in the committee to help veterans. I look forward to my continued partnership with the Secretary and with the VA. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here to testify today and for the work you do on behalf of our nation's veterans. Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Affordable Housing for Homeless Veterans Act. I look forward to passing this legislation and continuing work on behalf of veterans. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Representative Mann. I'd now like to call on my friend from the state of Rhode Island, Representative Cicilline.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say thank you to Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, and of course, Subcommittee Chairman Levin and Subcommittee Ranking Member Moore for conducting today's important hearing on proposals to protect veterans and service members. I am here to testify in support of HR 2915, the Protecting the Employment Rights of Service Members Act, PERSA, my bipartisan legislation to protect the rights of our men and women in uniform. I'd like to begin my testimony by thanking the veterans, service members, and organizations who have taken the time to express their support for this legislation. I'd also like to thank my colleagues who are original co-sponsors of the bill, including Chairman Takano and Representative Jared Golden and Representative Guy Reschenthaler. Our veterans and their families make incredible sacrifices in service to our country, and the fundamental idea that we are a nation of laws and institutions that guarantee the rights and prosperity of every American. We are a stronger nation because of these rights, which include the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, or USERRA. This law guarantees that veterans and service members, including members of the Reserves and National Guard, are free from workplace discrimination based on their military service. Enacted in 1994 following the Persian Gulf War, Congress intended USERRA to serve as a bulwark against the exploitation of veterans and service members. But too often they are unable to enforce their rights under USERRA in court because of the increased use of forced arbitration in employment contracts. Often buried in the fine print of these contracts and presented as a condition for employment, these clauses waive the rights of veterans and service members to their day in court before dispute even arises. As the Military Coalition, a consortium of military service organizations representing more than 5.5 million current and former service members, explains these clauses block access to the justice system and funnel service members' employment discrimination or wrongful termination, USERRA claims, into private, costly arbitration systems set up by the same employers. For over a decade, under both Democratic and Republican administrations, the Defense Department has warned Congress about the harmful effects of forced arbitration has on service members. In a 2006 report, the department advised Congress to prohibit provisions in loan contracts that require service members and family members to waive their rights to legal action. Importantly, this report was clear that waiver is not a matter of choice in take it or leave it contracts of adhesion. And this February, the Government Accountability Office stated in a report regarding the effects of forced arbitration on service members that mandatory arbitration clauses have affected service members' ability to assert their employment and consumer rights under USERRA and SCRA by preventing some from having their claims resolved in court. The Pentagon has prohibited the use of forced arbitration agreements in certain financial service contracts for more than a decade, recognizing that unscrupulous conduct was undermining military readiness and service members' access to relief in court. It's time to follow suit by prohibiting forced arbitration in veterans and service member employment contracts through passage of both PERSA and the Justice for Service Members Act. There is broad bipartisan support for this legislation. Over 25 military organizations, including the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the Military Officers Association of America, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and the Reserve Officers Association support PERSA and the Justice for Service Members Act. A coalition of service member support organizations wrote in a letter to the committee, and I quote, "This important legislation will empower service members and their families against the un-American practice of forced arbitration, a much too common dispute process that strips our service members of their afforded rights," end quote. The Assistant Secretary for Veterans Employment and Training of the U.S. Department of Labor has similarly observed that this legislation is critical to, and I quote, "to ensuring that USERRA operates to safeguard both substantive and procedural rights and benefits from reduction, limitation, or elimination," end quote. Since the Second World War, Congress has expanded and strengthened the rights and protections for veterans in the workforce. recognize that we must honor and respect our men and women in uniform. As a nation devoted to protecting American service members and their families from unscrupulous conduct, we must draw upon the strength of our laws to ensure that their rights are enforceable in court and that they're able to hold bad actors accountable. I thank the committee and ask you to keep in mind the case of Kevin Zober, who was lieutenant in the Army U.S. Navy Reserve, who was deployed multiple times. On the last day of his deployment to Afghanistan, they had a party for him with a cake that was shaped as an American flag. And hours later, he was fired, and he never was able to have his claim adjudicated under USERRA because of an arbitration clause in his employment contract. That repeats itself in many, many cases across the country. And so I urge the committee to support the legislation to correct this injustice. And again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today.
I thank my friend from Rhode Island, and I too would be remiss if I didn't just thank the chairman, Chairman Takano, for his great work and his leadership. And I'd now like to go to Representative Mace for her statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to thank Chairman Takano and also Ranking Member Bost, Subcommittee Chairman Levin, and Ranking Member Moore for having this today and allowing me to take this opportunity to speak briefly about my bill, which is HR 2327. I think it's also important to recognize that this idea stemmed from the grassroots, and it was driven by members of veteran service organizations and groups. And dialogue between VSOs and our committee work is so important, and it's proof that this work can lead to tangible results. This bill, I'm happy to report, is also supported by a number of VSOs, including the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, Paralyzed Veterans of America, the Student Veterans of America, and TAPS. And the Dependents Educational Assistance Program, the DEA, was first established in 1968 and provides just over $1,200 a month in tax-free benefits to eligible participants to help cover the cost of tuition, fees, living expenses, etc., while they're enrolled in higher education. Children, spouses, and survivors are eligible for this program if the veteran died while on active duty, is a former prisoner of war, has a permanent and total service-connected disability rating, or passes away from a service-connected disability. Current law requires that most spouses who become eligible for DEA benefits because the veteran died of a service-connected death while not on active duty only have 10 years to use the benefit. Children must use the benefit between the ages of 18 and 26. This bill would eliminate that 10-year limit for any recipient. By doing so, there would be parity between the DEA and other similar scholarships like the Fry Scholarship. And as everyone knows, life can change very quickly. And those who may not be ready to go back to school today may be tomorrow. And oftentimes spouses have to put off learning to take care of their children, take care of their families, and life moves very fast. So by providing more flexibility and removing the time limit, all recipients are able to embrace the concept of lifelong learning. And I can't think of a better effort for family members and spouses of those who've given everything in their lives, including their life, to be able to do this and do it in such a bipartisan fashion. So I look forward to working with Chairman Takano, Subcommittee Chairman Levin, and Ranking Member Bost, and also Subcommittee Ranking Member Moore. I thank you for your time this morning. I thank everyone for being on the subcommittee hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Mace. I'd now like to turn to my friend from New Jersey, Representative Cheryl, for her statement.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks to the chairman of the full committee, Chairman Takano. Thank you to Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee for providing me the opportunity to speak with you today. I'd also like to thank you for the hard work you're doing for our veterans in these truly challenging times. The whole country has struggled to find their way through this painful year dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and our veterans have really suffered as well. The critical work you are doing to reinvest in the economic future of those who've served will be key to not only rebuilding their lives, but the broader economy as well. One of the challenges of this past year is that in too many ways, we've all had to put our lives on hold. Schools and workplaces have closed, weddings postponed, and people have dipped into their savings or gone into debt to make ends meet. During my meetings with the veterans community of New Jersey's 11th District, one of the chief concerns they've highlighted is how this year has put on hold their capability to invest in their education with their GI Bill benefits. Our veterans earn their educational benefits through years of service. The GI Bill and other educational benefits empower them to be successful in the civilian workforce and contribute to their communities and the national economy. However, those same benefits still have an expiration date for many veterans, and they are now faced with the challenge of having one less year to use those benefits through no fault of their own. It's important to note that under Chairman Takano's leadership, the entire Veterans Affairs Committee has taken strides to protect these benefits, such as in the Student Veteran Coronavirus Response Act of 2020. However, the last year has shown that since that legislation was passed, our veterans need additional protections for their benefits. Current legislation only protects veteran benefits if they couldn't go to their chosen program of education because their institution was closed, and only offers protection for the duration of the coronavirus national emergency. But veterans in my district and throughout the country have had to forgo their education for a host of other reasons brought on by this national emergency, whether to care for their children, rejoin the workforce, to make up for lost wages, or because pre-existing conditions prevent them from returning to in-person learning without serious risk to their lives. Those veterans need their benefits protected as well. We must also ask, what about the next emergency? If a veteran can't use their benefit because of a natural disaster in their community, is that all that different from not being able to attend classes because of the pandemic? Which brings me to the reason I'm testifying today. HR 2167, the GI Bill, National Emergency Extended Deadline Act, or GI Bill NEED Act. This will empower the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to protect veterans' education benefits and keep them from expiring when a veteran is prevented from pursuing their education through no fault of their own, because of a national emergency or any other reason as determined by the Secretary. I would also like to take this opportunity to publicly thank my Republican colleague and fellow veteran, Congresswoman Miller Meeks, for her partnership in supporting this common sense bipartisan solution. I hope that this important legislation receives the subcommittee's full support. Our veterans have earned these benefits through service to this nation, and we can't let COVID-19 take them away. Before I conclude my remarks, I want to draw your attention to another important issue brought to my attention by representatives of the Student Veterans of America, who are also testifying today. Just as GI Bill benefits have an expiration for many of our veterans, so too does the Veteran Readiness and Employment Benefits, or VRE benefits, which enable our disabled veterans to effectively re-enter the workforce. I plan on submitting similar legislation in the coming weeks to provide protections to keep these benefits from expiring when our disabled veterans are prevented from accessing them because of a national emergency or some other reason. I look forward to again working with this subcommittee in protecting those benefits as well. Again, I want to thank the entire subcommittee for their continued service to veterans, the veteran service organizations for their consistent advocacy, and in particularly the Student Veterans of America for working with me to get the GI Bill NEED Act across the finish line. Last, I would also like to offer my thanks to all our veterans for their service to this country and to all of us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Cheryl. I'd now like to turn to the gentleman from North Carolina, Representative Cawthorn, for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Moore and Mr. Chairman, for your well wishes on the wedding. I did not know I could be this happy, but Christina and I both recognize that serving our veterans is more important than any honeymoon, so I'm very happy to be here and get to join you all virtually. The big reason it's so important to me is because for 8 generations, my family members have served in our armed forces. I grew up surrounded by men of courage and patriotism who had dedicated their lives and their honor in defense of this American Republic. I understand as much as one can without serving the struggle a veteran faces attempting to reacclimate to civilian life. I also believe it is incumbent on the American people to work hand in hand with our veterans and streamline their transition back into the workforce. To that end, I have introduced the Veterans Fellowship Act. This bill authorizes a pilot program to allow states to use grants or contracts to carry out a short-term fellowship program for unemployed veterans. This bill is not some revolutionary concept, but what it does is build off of the successes of other pilot programs in the veteran community. This bill would authorize DOL vets to carry out pilot programs similar to the fellowship programs created by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation to allow states to use grants or contracts to carry out a short-term fellowship program. After the participating states have been selected by the Department of Labor, each state would enter into an agreement with a nonprofit organization to carry out short-term fellowship programs. Participants would be provided a small stipend while they are participating in the program. The bill would authorize $10 million each year in current funding for the program. This bill that prioritizes our veterans and opens up new and unique ways towards employment. This new fellowship program will build upon the success of other fellowship programs across the country. And I am confident that it will empower unemployed veterans to find meaningful work in the post-COVID economy. The benefits of this legislation are numerous. It will give eligible veterans the ability to gain on-the-job experience in a field of their interest while still earning a monthly stipend. I always fight for our veteran community in NC 11, and this bill is a bipartisan measure that puts veterans first. I believe that one of the many attributes of Americanism is our sense of brotherhood. Those who sacrifice for the good of this nation are not simply a resource to be utilized and then cast aside. These are our heroes. These guardians of democracy, like many of you on this in this subcommittee, deserve much more than what our nation currently provides to them. Together, we can show these men and women who dedicated their lives to us that we will not turn our backs on them. Join me in supporting the Veterans Fellowship Act, and let's take a firm step forward towards honoring our veterans. Thank you very much, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen from North Carolina, and would now like to recognize Representative Miller Meeks for her opening. Oh, Representative Miller Meeks, you need to unmute. There you go. Oh, you're muted again. There you go.
Thank you, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee. I'm here today to speak on my legislation, the Vet Tech Enhancement Act of 2021. I introduced this legislation earlier this month with a fellow veteran, Congressman Kai Kahale, to help our veterans to re-enter the workforce. My legislation would increase the amount authorized to be appropriated for the high technology pilot program of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Vet Tech is a 5-year pilot program that allows eligible veterans to use GI-style benefits to attend innovative job training programs to prepare them for future employment in the technology industry. Through the program, one can get training in high-demand areas, including computer software, computer programming, data processing, information science, and media applications. With Vet Tech, one can get tuition for a full-time high-tech training program and money for housing during training. The Vet Tech pilot program was initially created as part of the Forever GI Bill that was signed into law in 2017. The program launched on April 1st, 2019, and since its launch, over 2,100 students have been trained in the Vet Tech program with an average salary of $62,000 per year. This program was initially authorized at $15 million per year, but it has proven so successful that Congress increased the authorized funding to $45 million per year as part of the Johnny Isakson and David P. Rowe Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act that passed in December. However, the VA has made it clear that even this increase does not provide enough funding to accommodate demand for this program. In the first 8 days of reopening the program earlier this month, the VA reports that it received nearly 1,200 new applications for the program. As a result of the high demand and the success of this pilot program, the VA supports an increase in funding and has even suggested that Congress consider converting the pilot program to a permanent GI Bill benefit. My common sense bill, the Vet Tech Enhancement Act, would increase current funding for the Vet Tech program from $45 million to $125 million per year to allow the VA to enroll more veterans in this popular program. I've spoken with dozens of veterans groups in my district, and there is a large amount of support for this popular and common sense program. Without objection, Mr. Chair, I would like to submit letters of support for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our veterans have given so much to protect and serve our nation, and we are all familiar with the employment, financial, and mental health challenges many of them face when they leave the military. This is another highly successful avenue to help assist our veterans to re-enter the civilian workforce and also helps with their mental health. It is clear that there is a need for this increase in funding for the Vet Tech program, and I would urge all of my colleagues here to support this legislation. Lastly, I want to thank all of our veterans for their service to our great country. Thank you, Chairman Levin. I yield back.
I thank the representative from Iowa, and I'd now like to recognize my friend from Ohio, Representative Wenstrup, for his remarks.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore. I appreciate the opportunity to be with the members of the VA committee today and the opportunity to speak on my bill, actually our bill, Mr. Chairman, HR 2494, the Veterans Education Transition and Opportunity Prioritization Plan Act, or VET OP Act. As a member of the armed forces, as a soldier, I know how important it is to help our warfighters succeed in their transition to civilian life. And, I think a lot of times, far too often, many people think that veterans return from war, from service, in some ways defeated, and they come out with skills that aren't necessarily applicable to the civilian world. I heard former President Bush one time say, when you put on your resume what your skills are, you don't really want to put sniper, but you do want to put down that you pay attention to detail, that you show up for work on time, those types of skills that apply to anything in the civilian world. So a lot of times I think this broken veteran narrative, it just couldn't be further from the truth. Our veterans are strong, dependable leaders, and our commitment to programs that promote opportunity and success reinforces their abilities. And so I think our service members should have a plan from the day they enter the military, really, to the day they transition out and beyond, to know what they're going to do next. But our veterans, as we say in the Army, are soldiers for life. And we need to put that emphasis on that and pay attention to what should be their success after their service. And currently, the Veterans Benefits Administration is responsible for all VA benefits provided to veterans outside of healthcare and cemetery services. And so while there's many different benefits that VBA provides, the bulk of staffing and resources have been understandably directed towards the administration of disability compensation and pension claims. And so this has resulted, unfortunately, not necessarily intentionally, but it resulted in a lack of attention on the administration of other VBA benefits, such as the Forever GI Bill, vocational rehabilitation, home loan benefits, and the VA's portion of the Transition Assistance Program. So by aligning transition, education, and employment programs in a fourth administration, within the VA, the VET OP Act will modernize the department and ensure that these opportunity-focused programs get the high priority that they deserve and the oversight that they need to better serve our veterans. I know when I returned from Iraq after a year, as a reservist, they said, you don't have to return to work for 90 days. And I said, I'm going next week. My adrenaline had been flowing 24/7 for a year. The last thing I need to do is sit around my house or find other things to do that aren't as constructive. Let's face it, our military, when they serve in uniform, they get up every day because they are needed. They are part of a team. They're relied upon. And it's the type of lifestyle they need to transition to. So the sooner we have soldiers and other members of the armed services in a position to know what they're doing next and to be able to get back on their feet and be contributing to something, the better off they're going to be. So I want to thank you, Chairman Levin, for leading this legislation with me. I greatly appreciate it. I know this is our second successive Congress in doing it. Let's push this across the line this time. And I also want to thank Senators Rubio and Hassan for their partnership in the Senate. And with that, I yield back. And again, thank you all for your time and consideration today.
Thank you, Representative Wenstrup, and thanks for your partnership and collaboration on the VET OP Act and for your service as well. And we'll continue moving forward. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that. Do any members have questions for their colleagues for this panel? Hearing none, this panel is now excused, and it is now my pleasure to introduce our second panel, consisting of representatives from veteran service organizations. First, we have Caitlin Hetrick, Government Affairs Associate for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Now I can see you all. Hello there. Next, we have Justin Hoschild, Legal Fellow for the Student Veterans of America. After that, we have Morgan Brown, National Legislative Director for Paralyzed Veterans of America. After that is Ashlyn Haycock, Deputy Director of Policy and Legislation for Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And finally, Matthew Doyle, Deputy Director of the National Legislative Service for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. It's wonderful to see you all virtually this morning. With that, I now recognize Ms. Hetrick for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America's more than 425,000 members, thank you for the opportunity to share our views, data, and experiences on the pending legislation before the subcommittee today. I come to you today as not only an associate of government affairs at IVA, but as a woman veteran, former military spouse, and mother. I am also the daughter of a Navy veteran, sister of a Marine gunnery sergeant, and have more family members that are serving or have served than I can count. Military service and love for my country and those that served is not just something that I choose to do, but has been instilled in me since I was a young child. I served as an aviation electronics technician in the world's finest Navy and chose to leave service to spend more time with my toddler son. It was a choice that I never wanted to make, but I knew was the right one at the time. My experiences transitioning following my service are all too common. And when I chose to serve as my university's student veteran organization president, I saw firsthand the multitude of issues that affect our nation's veterans when they hang up their boots and rejoin the civilian world. This sparked a fire in me to never stop advocating for those that feel there aren't any options and who have given up asking for help. This is why I am here today. In the fall of 2018, an IT issue at VA resulted in tens of thousands of veterans not receiving their GI Bill monthly housing stipend for months. As someone that assisted in the certification of veterans benefits at my university during this time, I saw firsthand the ramifications that this situation had. Several of my brothers and sisters were without their allowance for months, and had our university not established an emergency fund specifically for veterans, many of them would have not had food on their tables. Because of situations like this, IVA strongly supports the legislation up for discussion today that would implement a modern information technology service to process claims for educational assistance. We must ensure that the systems in place to process their education claims are modernized, and that veterans choosing to utilize their earned education benefits are not caused undue stress from the administration established to help them. The COVID-19 pandemic brought a wealth of problems in addition to a public health crisis. Some of the most severely affected by this were students. Because of the switch to virtual learning, some students were forced to put their educational goals on hold due to the lack of their program being offered or because their school closed completely. For some, this had catastrophic consequences as the time limit for using their GI Bill benefit expired. When it comes to situations that are out of a veteran's control, such as a national emergency, we must ensure that VA's educational programs are flexible. IVA strongly supports the legislation by Representative Sherrill that provides an extension of the time limitations to use one's GI Bill because a school closed due to an emergency. The Survivors and Dependents Educational Assistance Program is an incredible benefit for dependents of fallen service members and the families of disabled veterans. IVA supports the draft legislation that would eliminate the time period for eligibility for survivors and dependents to use the Educational Assistance Program. We do not know what lies ahead in life for someone eligible for this program, and the pandemic has shown us that many may choose to switch to a new career path if theirs becomes difficult due to unforeseen circumstances. IVA strongly believes that we should continually be looking for ways to strengthen educational support for surviving families. In IVA's most recent survey, 24% of our members reported going without a home for over a year after they transitioned out of the military, and 81% reported couch surfing temporarily. Housing and homelessness related referrals are among the services most requested through IVA's Quick Reaction Force, a free 24/7 case management program for veterans and their families. For this reason, IVA strongly supports the Affordable Housing for Homeless Veterans Act. Creating solutions to aid homeless veterans in obtaining affordable housing is paramount. Additionally, IVA is supportive of the Homeless Veterans Credit Repair, Enhancement, and Debt Improvement for Tomorrow Act. It is widely known that service members are often targeted by credit agencies from the moment they ship off to boot camp. Cash advance establishments are plentiful right outside many military bases. In IVA's most recent survey, 36% of our members believe that they may have or did experience predatory loan practices. Credit education is not standard practice within our educational systems, so it's easy to see how our newly capped brothers and sisters could view these offers as a good idea. While the military does provide a guaranteed paycheck that helps to keep up with debt, many veterans experience difficulties after leaving. This legislation would provide great benefits and help to understand how credit counseling could help to reduce the number of homeless veterans. Members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to share IVA's views on these issues today. I look forward to working with the subcommittee in the future, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hetrick. I now recognize Mr. Housechild for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Student Veterans of America to submit our testimony on pending legislation. SVA has a mission focused on empowering student veterans, and we are committed to providing an educational experience that goes beyond the classroom. Through a dedicated network of more than 1,500 on-campus chapters, SVA aims to inspire yesterday's warriors by connecting student veterans with a community of like-minded chapter leaders. We appreciate the opportunity to share our views on the legislation before you today, which will directly impact student veterans, their families, and survivors. There are several matters I would like to discuss briefly, and I look forward to any questions the subcommittee may have afterward. I'll begin by addressing the planned phase out of VA's Roundout policy. Preserving VA's Roundout practice is a top priority for Student Veterans of America, primarily due to its urgency. As a general matter, SVA is supportive of legislation that would formalize the Roundout policy at VA, but we understand the department has found a new path forward on this issue in just the last few days. Under the new proposal, it appears VA would continue offering the Roundout option to provide students with ongoing flexibility in their final term, but tighten the policy's requirements to bring it in line with GI Bill intent that benefits flow to courses relevant to a degree program. SVA is encouraged by this new conversation, and we look forward to additional details about this potential solution. Next, I would like to discuss the draft legislation that would prevent veterans' education benefit eligibility from lapsing during emergencies. SVA research on the impact of natural disasters shows student veterans have long faced challenges managing education benefits in emergency situations. But the pandemic showed us just how many ways emergencies can negatively affect veterans' education benefits. Thanks to Congress's quick attention to these issues and swift action to pass emergency protections last year, student veterans were spared the brunt of the numerous nightmare scenarios they could have faced. One of the many protections passed sought to preserve the limited time some veterans have to use their benefits. During the pandemic, many student veterans subject to benefit eligibility windows were unexpectedly prevented from pursuing their educations, despite the clock continuing to run on their benefit eligibility. The protection passed last year paused eligibility periods while students were prevented from pursuing their studies, and this preserved valuable time for veterans to use their education benefits later. The draft legislation before this subcommittee today is an important forward-thinking effort that would make this protection permanent and broadly available for VA to use in future emergencies. The COVID-19 pandemic was not the first emergency student veterans have faced, and it certainly will not be the last. SVA supports this draft legislation as an important first step in a larger, more comprehensive effort to permanently codify the many protections passed in the response to the pandemic and toward fully protecting student veterans and their benefits in future emergencies. Next, I'll turn to the draft legislation that would establish parameters for modernization of VA education IT infrastructure. A digital GI Bill is long overdue. So SVA thanks Congress for providing VA the necessary funding to begin the modernization effort, and we applaud VA for the swift actions they have taken thus far to begin the process. A fully digital GI Bill has the power to exponentially improve veterans' higher education experience by helping VA move away from a benefits processing system that is over half a century old, improving customer service wait times and overall interactions, and providing veterans with real-time information about their education benefits. These are critical changes, so timely and effective implementation is incredibly important. SVA supports this draft legislation because it will establish important structure, objectives, and transparency requirements for VA's digital GI Bill efforts. We look forward to working with the members of this subcommittee and officials at VA to ensure this modernization effort is efficient and effective. Finally, I would like to note that SVA is also supportive of the draft legislation that would create a Veterans Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration within VA. This proposal would ensure VA's economic opportunity programs have accountable leadership and are appropriately prioritized. Thank you for your time, attention, and devotion to the cause of veterans in higher education. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hochschild. When I introduced our panelists, I had mentioned Morgan Brown from PVA. We are actually joined by another fantastic representative from PVA, Maureen Elias, and I'd now like to recognize Maureen Elias from PVA.
Chairman Takano, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the subcommittee. Paralyzed Veterans of America, or PVA, would like to thank you for the opportunity to submit our views on pending legislation impacting the Department of Veterans Affairs, or VA, that is before the subcommittee. No group of veterans understand the full scope of benefits and care provided by VA better than PVA members. And some of the bills on today's agenda will help ensure veterans who have incurred a spinal cord injury or disorder receive much needed aid and support. Freedom and independence are two of the best ways to boost the mental health of an individual living with a disability. Relying on others for everything, especially transportation, can be frustrating, leaving veterans feeling helpless and lowering their self-worth. And we know well the danger when a person feels they are a burden to others. Having access to an adapted vehicle allows veterans to feel stronger and builds inner confidence and pride in their ability to maintain their health, meet work and family obligations, and attend community engagements. When the automobile allowance was first enacted, the life expectancy of a veteran with a spinal cord injury, or SCI, was just a few years. Now, thanks to major medical advancements, veterans are not only living through complex injuries that might have previously resulted in death, their life expectancy has increased by almost 4 decades or longer. And when you realize the average life expectancy of a vehicle is only about 11 years, it becomes obvious the benefit is not meeting the needs of these veterans. Since these vehicles can be costly to purchase, even with a grant, veterans are driving vehicles well past their lifespan. In a recent conference, one of our members shared that he received an automobile allowance 42 years ago. He is still driving that vehicle, which now has 500,000 miles on it, because he cannot afford to replace it. The repairs for this vehicle are expensive and place a burden on the veteran, but are less costly upfront than purchasing a new vehicle. The draft legislation being looked at today would allow veterans who have not received an automobile allowance in at least 10 years to receive another one. This would allow veterans the freedom to purchase new, safe vehicles when the lifespan of their transportation has ended, as well as allow them the opportunity to take advantage of innovative automobile design and mobility equipment advancements. It would also allow veterans whose qualifying injuries occurred after their service to receive a smaller amount of assistance towards the purchase of a vehicle as well. Extending help to these veterans would ensure that they are better able to meet their transportation needs, including improving their ability to access medical care. We are also pleased to see language that would provide veterans whose injuries are not service-connected access to VA's Automobile Adaptive Equipment Program, which provides necessary modification to a vehicle that would allow veterans with qualifying conditions to enter, exit, and/or operate a motor vehicle or other conveyance. This type of equipment greatly improves a veteran's freedom and mobility. We are pleased that this bill would both codify VA's provision of ingress-egress to the vehicle and recognize the importance of providing driver modifications to all eligible veterans. We urge the House to introduce and quickly pass this legislation and encourage the Senate to bring this to the floor and vote with urgency. There are a couple of bills aimed at improving employment services for veterans. PVA supports the draft legislation that directs the Department of Labor to carry out a pilot program on the short-term fellowship programs for veterans. However, language should be added that states, in order for a nonprofit to be eligible for a grant, it must demonstrate the capacity for serving veterans with significant service-connected and non-service-connected disabilities. This demographic should also be spelled out in a reporting requirement, and that the program prioritize veterans with disabilities, as well as those in underserved communities. We also support the draft bill, which would increase the amount authorized to be appropriated for VA's high technology pilot program. Here again, we recommend priority of placement be given to veterans with disabilities. And finally, we are pleased to support the draft legislation that would establish the IT program for development of the various education programs. Last year, the organizations comprising the independent budget identified the need of the digital GI Bill. We look forward to watching this upgrade of the current program be developed and deployed to bring the VA educational system into the 21st century. PBA would once again like to thank the subcommittee for the opportunity to present our views on the pending legislation and would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Elias. I now recognize Ms. Haycock for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and distinguished committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the 100,000 surviving families of our nation's fallen heroes that the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors represents. TAPS is grateful to Representatives Moore and Trone for introducing the Colonel John M. McHugh Tuition Fairness for Survivors Act this week to guarantee in-state tuition for Chapter 35 recipients. While TAPS appreciates the committee for previously passing legislation to guarantee in-state tuition for Frye Scholarship recipients and post 9/11 GI Bill recipients, once again, those using Chapter 35 benefits have been excluded. Chapter 35 is the most outdated education benefit VA provides, and even with the $200 increase under the Forever GI Bill, it's only slightly more than half of what the Montgomery GI Bill covers, and pennies in comparison to the post 9/11 GI Bill. The set rate for Chapter 35 is currently $1,265 per month, averaging out to just over $11,000 per year to pay for all college-related expenses, and in most cases will not cover the cost of attendance at an in-state institution of higher learning, let alone the out-of-state university. These families include that of Monica Jakaran of California. Monica's husband, Navy Petty Officer First Class DJ Jakaran, was medically retired a few months prior to his death due to a service-connected illness in 2014. So they are only eligible for Chapter 35 benefits. Monica's 15-year-old daughter, Bella, has always dreamed of attending Arizona State University, but she has actively discouraged it as she cannot afford to pay the out-of-state tuition difference and does not want her daughter bogged down with student loans. The bill would make a world of difference for families like Monica's by allowing them to pursue their dreams, whatever they may be. Long-term, TAPS would like to sunset Chapter 35 and move everyone into the Frye Scholarship. In the meantime, guaranteeing in-state tuition will at least give Chapter 35 recipients more options for colleges to attend affordably and reduce the amount of student loans those students may need to cover the cost of college. It will make a huge impact on the lives of the over 150,000 Chapter 35 recipients without costing the federal government more money. We would also like to thank the sponsors for naming the bill on behalf of the late Colonel John McHugh, who was killed in action in Afghanistan in 2010, leaving behind his wife, Connie McHugh, and their 5 children who reside in Representative Moore's district in Alabama. The younger McHugh children will benefit from the proposed legislation, and the family is incredibly grateful for the opportunity to honor their hero in this way. Additionally, TAPS would like to express our support for HR 2327 to remove the delimiting date for Chapter 35 recipients. This is also a parity issue, as we have already done it for Frye Scholarship eligible spouses under the Forever GI Bill in 2017. The average military widow is 25 years old with 2 children when the service member or veteran dies. It is not realistic to expect them to be able to return to school and use those benefits in 10 years. It's not easy to raise grieving children while grieving yourself and find the time to return to school and work to put food on the table. Most of our families wait until their children are in high school or college to return to school themselves. And this has worked great for our Frye Scholarship recipients. But this is not an option for our Chapter 35 families, and it's something that needs to be remedied. It would make a world of difference for survivors like Renee Munzinski, surviving spouse of Navy Petty Officer Second Class Matthew Munzinski. Matt died in an aviation accident in June 2001, making the family a few months short of eligibility for the Frye Scholarship and any post 9/11 benefits. Renee and her husband were both active duty at the time of his death. Renee was forced out of the Marine Corps after Matthew's death because she lacked the family care plan for their young daughter, Ashley. As a single parent, Renee was unable to return to school right away and was only able to use some of her Chapter 35 benefits before they expired. She is currently paying for graduate school with student loans due to lack of other options. While we do wish the proposal would be retroactive to those who have long had their benefits expire or soon to expire, we understand the budgetary restraints and hope it's something the committee would consider doing in the future for all post 9/11 GI Bill recipients and Chapter 35 recipients. Finally, we would like to express our support for the draft proposal to modernize the VA IT system. We appreciate the committee for providing money to the Department of Veterans Affairs Education Services in late 2020 to help bring the IT programs into the modern era. We have all seen how outdated the systems are and how frustrating it is for processors to quickly process the large number of claims they receive. We support the draft language to ensure that the money is used to build out the system in the next 3 years, and we appreciate that all education benefits, including Chapter 35, are included in that process. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Haycock. I now recognize Mr. Doyle for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the men and women of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to testify on legislation pending before this subcommittee. It's also great to see the chairman of the full committee, Chairman Takano, here today as well. The VFW supports the proposal to permit veterans to round out during their final semester in order to continue receiving VA benefits. Many student veterans take irregular course loads so they can balance their responsibilities. Others begin a new course of study with some academic credit attained prior to or during military service. Nearly all student veterans receive a handful of credits for their military experience, oftentimes fulfilling physical education requirements. Accordingly, a large number of student veterans only need to take 1 or 2 classes during their final semester to complete their degree. During my final semester as an undergrad, I took an additional course that wasn't required for my degree. I did this so I would receive VA housing payments at the rate available to full-time students. I chose an elective course in a department outside of my major because it was offered on a pass-fail basis. This permitted me to balance the workload of my otherwise demanding schedule. Others should have the same opportunity to round out during their final semester and should not be encumbered by bureaucratic red tape concerning the types of courses they are permitted to take. All student veterans should be permitted to round out during their final semester with courses that would otherwise count for academic credit in their chosen degree. The VFW supports the intent of the Adaptive Automobile Grant proposal and has a recommendation to improve it. Although we fully support the expansion of the program for service-disabled veterans, we do not support expanding eligibility to non-service disabled veterans. The Adaptive Automobile Grant program is an incredible benefit for severely disabled veterans. However, the one-time grant does not match the realities of car ownership in the 21st century. The average useful life of an automobile is approximately 10 years. Therefore, veterans who have previously received a grant must pay for their next specially equipped vehicle on their own. There can be no question that the automobile is an essential mode of transportation for almost every American. Car ownership is necessary to ensure self-reliance in employment, grocery shopping, attending doctor appointments, and many other everyday activities. The Adaptive Automobile Grant program makes it possible for severely impaired service-disabled veterans to own their own car and navigate daily life with dignity. A one-time grant shifts the burden of purchasing a subsequent vehicle to the veteran. It would be analogous for VA to provide only the first prosthetic or assistive device to a service-disabled veteran, only to make them purchase their next device out of pocket. Fortunately, that's not how those programs are administered. It isn't how the Adaptive Automobile program should function either. Additionally, this program was created to help service-disabled veterans and service members. Any expansion of eligibility beyond that cohort would drive up cost and cannibalize the program. Accordingly, the VFW cannot support Section 3 of this proposal, which would permit veterans with a non-service connected disability to receive a grant under this program. The VFW also supports the proposal to eliminate the 10-year deadline for utilizing survivors and dependents' educational assistance benefits. We have long held the view that education and employment are lifelong needs. Therefore, veterans and eligible survivors and dependents absolutely must have the option to use their VA education and training benefits for life. This important bill would create parity between Chapter 35 and other VA education programs and is an important step toward removing all unnecessary delimiting dates. Finally, the VFW supports the proposal to establish the Veterans Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration, also known as a fourth administration. The Veterans Benefits Administration is the largest of VA's 3 administrations. It oversees compensation and pension, as well as the GI Bill, VR&E, housing and business loans, and the Transition Assistance Program. These programs are too large and too diverse to fall under one single administration. Virtually every veteran pursues education, training, or gainful employment after military service. Accordingly, the significance of economic opportunity programs cannot be overemphasized. The creation of a fourth administration would permit the new undersecretary to adequately promote economic opportunity programs and reallocate internal resources. It would also create a central point of contact for veterans, service organizations, and Congress. This would ensure that the GI Bill, VRNE, home loans, and other economic opportunity benefits receive the attention, management, and oversight they deserve. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. Again, the VFW thanks you and the ranking member for the opportunity to testify on these important issues before this subcommittee. I'm prepared to take any questions you or the subcommittee members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. And with that, I recognize myself for 5 minutes to begin the question portion of the hearing. And Mr. Doyle, you were prescient because I wanted to begin my questions with you. I wanted to thank you for your testimony related to my draft legislation, the Value Added Homes for Veterans Act. Taking existing energy efficiencies into account when a veteran is utilizing the VA home loan program to purchase a home is a natural extension to the VA energy efficient mortgage program. Can you speak briefly to how this bill will impact veterans utilizing their home loan benefit?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your question. So we think this is a very creative solution to allow veterans to present evidence that their energy efficient homes incur less cost than other non-energy efficient homes so that they can obtain a loan on the basis of accurate data reflecting their actual costs. Quite frankly, it would permit veterans to receive a loan on the basis of their actual cost, which would decrease their debt to income ratio and possibly permit veterans to purchase a larger home based on their actual financial whole picture of their finances.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Hochschild, I wanted to turn to you. I appreciate the description in your testimony of how adding a fourth administration at the VA dedicated to economic opportunity and transition would benefit a veteran's whole health. Can you please explain what establishing a fourth administration would mean for student veterans and how it may affect their perception of and interactions with the VA at large?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. It's an important one. And we think the emphasis at VA on whole health is incredibly appropriate. We're just not entirely certain that economic opportunity is a big enough part of that, or is emphasized enough within that whole health concept. And specifically with regard to student veterans, we believe that moving on from their higher education experience into a professional career is a major part of that whole health concept. So we can achieve whole health and economic opportunity for student veterans by ensuring that there is a greater emphasis on them moving to a professional career after higher education. And that's really what we think the whole health concept is when it comes to student veterans.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hochschild. Ms. Haycock, I wanted to turn to you. Modernizing VA's IT systems has long been a priority of this committee and certainly of the subcommittee. I got to go to Muskogee, Oklahoma and see a number of the IT systems for the GI Bill that they need some work, shall we say. And in your written testimony, you state that processing Chapter 35 benefits is even harder than processing other education benefits. Can you please explain how or why that is and provide any suggestions you have that VA should take into consideration during the digital GI Bill modernization process?
Sure. So I sat through the same demonstration you have, only they did it for all the VSOs a couple of years ago. It was very eye-opening to see just how outdated and I mean, some of the systems are older than I am, which is very concerning. But you know, when I then asked about Chapter 35 claims, they said it was a completely different system that they were using, and that it was actually more complicated, and why there were more errors sometimes in Chapter 35 claims being adjudicated. So we have not seen a full demonstration of it, but they made it very clear that it's even more difficult for the processors to do the 35 claims, which, you know, 35 is the oldest benefits left, and you're looking at a system from the 60s, really, that's hasn't been improved. And we see a lot of claim issues with the 35 families in particular, where they're not done correctly, or there's issues in the certificates, things like that. So making sure that, you know, we would love to see it all in one system. And I think that's VA's intent, is to make sure that it's easy for them to click, you know, this person is 33 or 35 or whichever program they're receiving, and make it easy, as opposed to having to go into a completely different system for these families the way they currently do.
I am with you 100% on that, Ms. Haycock. I have to tell you that seeing that they're still using COBOL for some of this. And I give great credit to the people that work at the call center in Muskogee for figuring out how to get all those different databases to speak to one another and to ultimately serve the veterans. But I'm committed. I know my colleagues and our staff, we're all committed to doing everything we can, working with you, working with VA to finally fix this problem. And hopefully the next time we go to Muskogee, it will be fixed. And we can also have some more good barbecue, because they do have excellent barbecue in Muskogee. With that, I want to turn to Representative Moore, our ranking member, for his 5 minutes. Ranking Member Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Ms. Aycock, can you please tell us about the limitations on the current DEA program and why you believe providing equity for in-state tuition is so critically important?
Absolutely. So just like the Fry Scholarship recipients, even before Forever GI Bill, we gave them guaranteed in-state tuition. And this, it has made a world of difference for those families. It's given them the choice of where they really want to go to school. We see it in our military community that our families move a lot, and it's not any different in the survivor space, where, when a service member or veteran dies, the family may leave, Fort Rucker, Alabama, and relocate to Tennessee or Wisconsin or wherever the family's originally from, but the family may want to return to Alabama for college or somewhere else that they've been stationed where they feel more of a connection, but that in-state tuition piece is lacking. And so we want to make sure that those families have the ability to afford to go where they want to go to school.
Very good. Okay, so a follow-up to that too. Can you please tell us how the tenure delimiting actually currently harms beneficiaries? In other words, who may wait to take advantage of that program? How is that harming? What are you seeing out there?
So from the survivor space in particular, a transition for a veteran in the original post 9/11, they got 15 years. And even that is complicated. Transition, big changes in life are complicated. But grief is an entirely different issue where you're having to completely restructure your life. My mom never took advantage of those benefits. My dad died in a training accident in 2002. My brothers and I were all in elementary school. It was not an option for her to stop working while raising us to go back to school at that time. And by the time that I was in college and my brothers were in high school, we were at the 10-year mark. And so it's very difficult for our families, and most of them are younger widows. Most of them don't have education prior to the loss of their service member. We see it a lot in the military spouse community where they're underemployed, underserved population. And it's even worse with the survivor community. And so making sure that they can use those benefits when works for them is going to be key.
Gotcha. And I think I agree with that. I taught a young man Sunday school that was killed in Iraq in a roadside bomb, and he had a young daughter. And it was a matter of now that mom was going to have to figure out how to kind of get them on their feet and in life, and she wasn't really thinking about tuition. And so that was a concern for us too, with it expiring. So, and then I guess, Matthew, I got a question for you. It's actually all on the panel, but I guess we'll just direct it to you. What is your view on the VTech program right now? The VA is going to highlight that this program is very popular and 80% of the participants are currently employed. Do you have suggestions for other programs that could help veterans that are a bit outside the traditional benefits and programs for veterans?
So thank you for your question. We absolutely agree that VetTech is a phenomenal program. It's only in its second year or technically third year of operation right now, but we hear nothing but positive feedback. We definitely want to see increased resources to ensure that all veterans who are interested in the program can actually secure a seat and receive the retraining that they need to enter the job force. We also think that apprenticeships are a great way for veterans to transitioning service members to re-enter the workforce. Apprenticeships are on the rise. They've increased exponentially within the last 10 years, every single year. And so more information about apprenticeships would be phenomenal for our veterans as they're transitioning to understand different opportunities that are available to them on the outside.
Very good. Yeah, that I haven't heard that, but that would be a great approach. I think we see that some in local schools when the kids get out and they get opportunities to get an apprenticeship, that it certainly offers them opportunities to kind of see a field they may want to go into, but I could see that with veterans working very well. So So thank you. And I just want to say thank you all so much for being here today and doing this. This is Chairman, I appreciate you working together with us on these issues. And so thank you again. I have family members in the military, son-in-law in the 82nd Airborne. My brother's retired Lieutenant Colonel, Marines. So thank you all for your service. We certainly appreciate it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, my time seems to be about expired, but thank you again for being here, and I appreciate all the panelists.
I thank the ranking member and again, excited to work together. And I'd now like to recognize our great chairman of the full House Veterans Affairs Committee, Chairman Takano, for his questions.
Well, I thank Chairman Levin for your recognition, and I certainly also appreciate the work that the ranking member, Mr. Moore, does with this committee. And let me thank my colleagues and the witnesses who are here today for this important legislative hearing. And I'm happy we're proceeding in discussion on these pieces of legislation that will improve the provision of education, employment, and housing benefits for veterans, service members, and their families. There are a wide range of proposals to consider today, from making it easier for survivors and dependents to use their education benefits, to ensuring we and VA understand the effects credit and financial counseling may have for veterans experiencing or who are either experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the need for these legislative changes, and I am grateful for the opportunity to discuss these issues with you all today. And with that, I'm going to begin my questions. My first question is to Maureen Elias of Paralyzed Veterans of America. Ms. Elias, in your written testimony, you discussed Representative Cicilline's Protecting Employment Rights of Service Members Act, which preserves USERRA rights when an employer includes forced arbitration in employment contracts. Can you please discuss how forced arbitration clauses pose hurdles to service members who file claims or complaints against their employers? And in particular, maybe if there's an example you might share from among your members.
Thank you for that question, Chairman Takano. I think, the focus here is ensuring that veterans or service members and veterans have access to their rights. And with forced arbitration clauses, sometimes it skips over that hurdle and it prevents them from having their day in court. And so it's really important to make sure that that's an opportunity. I don't have an example from PVA, but I do have an example from my own personal life. My uncle David Axtell was an Air Force reservist who was called to duty. And when he came back after 4 years serving OEF, he was denied his reemployment rights. And luckily, he didn't have a forced arbitration clause and was able to see his day in court. But I think it's really important to make sure that that is there so that when service members return and need to get back into their employment, they have every right and opportunity that should be afforded to them.
Well, thank you, Ms. Elias. I want to thank you for your testimony regarding the VA's automobile allowance program and eligibility. Will you briefly explain how the program in its current state is not effectively serving veterans?
Thank you for that question. I'm so glad you asked that. The way the current program for the automobile allowance stands is you only get one grant in your entire lifetime. And that's, we're learning that veterans are living longer. And so what we're seeing is some veterans who are younger are waiting to get that automobile grant because they want to wait until they're in a power chair or until they feel that this is the one time they have to use the grant. And so they want to save it till they really need it. But the fact of the matter is they need it now. The act of transferring yourself into and out of a small compact vehicle without the right adaptations is hard on the body and creates a lot of wear and tear. So if they have the opportunity to receive that grant every 10 years, they can have the opportunity to purchase the vehicle that their body and their condition needs as the time is appropriate. And then for veterans, such as the example of our member who has a vehicle that's got over 500,000 miles on it, that's not the safest mode of transportation out there and it's not reliable. And so it would allow these veterans who are driving old, antiquated automobiles to have safe access to transportation. And so, the way it currently is with only one automobile allowance in your lifetime, it's just not enough to meet what our veterans need and to make sure we're taking the best care of them.
Well, thank you for that. Can you please also explain the benefits of expanding program eligibility to veterans with non-service connected disabilities?
Thank you for that question, and I'm really glad you asked it. When it comes to the non-service connected veterans, we're talking about veterans who the VA has agreed are catastrophically disabled and has committed to care for their health. So these are people who are already under the purview of the VA. And we know that transportation is a social determinant of health, as Justin from SVA talked about when it comes to looking at whole health. VBA needs to stop treating their services as separate from VHA, but more as complementary. The services that they provide have a direct impact on the health and welfare of a veteran. So to deny benefits on the VBA side of the house is only going to make things costlier on the VHA side of the house. More so, this is what our veterans who have non-service connected catastrophic disabilities tell us is their greatest area of need. And so to deny it because it might be hard to implement or is costly is really the wrong answer.
Well, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, this has been very, very valuable to hear. I just am always amazed at the work, how much the VSOs assist us in trying to get all of this right. So I want to thank all of you for being here. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time you accorded me today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree completely. We are so grateful to all the VSOs for their collaboration and just for your indispensable work and leadership. And we'll be looking forward to a whole lot more collaboration in the new Congress. So thank you all so much. And that concludes our VSO panel. So we'll now begin our final panel consisting of representatives from the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we're grateful that they are joining us. First, we have Mike Frew, Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits for the Veterans Benefits Administration. Hi there, Mr. Frew, and he is accompanied by James Rollman, Deputy Director for Program Management for Education Services for the Veterans Benefits Administration, and Mike Fisher, Chief Officer for Readjustment Counseling Service for Veterans Health Administration. Thank you all so much for joining the subcommittee today. We also have a written statement from the Department of Labor, Veterans Employment and Training Service, which will be entered into the record. With that, I'd now like to recognize Mr. Frew for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Moore, and members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to provide VA's views on pending legislation. With me today is James Ruhlman, Deputy Director in our Education Service, and Michael Fisher, Chief of our Readjustment Counseling Service. The bills he brought today reflect the desire to ensure all veterans, their dependents and survivors can access and make maximum use of the broad array of benefits and services they have earned. I want to express my appreciation of the considerable effort by your staff and you in putting into drafting these bills. I believe you'll find an equal measure of effort from VA staff to provide you with input based on our experience and dedication to providing the highest levels of service to those who have served, as well as their families. Although we don't support all of the bills, we fully support the desire to help veterans build civilian lives of opportunity and well-being through effective use of benefits that allow them to take full advantage of their skills and talents. I want to focus my remarks on the unnumbered bill that would create the Veterans Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration within VA. While VA appreciates the committee's intent to improve the services and resources offered by these programs, we do not support this bill. The current structure of the department appropriately reflects the significant interrelationship of all veterans benefits programs. The current structure provides for a single advocate for veteran benefits at the department, working to secure resources among the other administrations and staff offices. Creating 2 undersecretaries, where there's now 1, will diminish the ability to advocate for all benefits and will result in programs that currently cooperate becoming competitors for the same resources. Far from being overshadowed by other benefits, loan guarantee, VRE, and transition and economic development programs are part of an integrated suite of interdependent services and benefits. All benefit programs share the same predictive analytics, contracting, and data that enable efficient operation of an organization with 25,000 people serving over 6.5 million veterans. Creating a new administration within VA is more difficult than just shifting boxes on an org chart. It requires the recreation of enabling structures that, while they don't directly provide benefits themselves, they're indispensable in doing so. More than just finance, HR, and facilities, there are many other staff offices that we use in VBA, like production optimization, outreach, field operations, IT integration, strategic program management, business intelligence, communications, governance, contracting, contact centers, suicide prevention, and appeals management. They would all have to be replicated in the new administration, requiring executive leadership and staffing. This is analogous to trying to divide a car. You can't simply cut a car in two and have two operational cars. And this replication would come at additional cost. We estimate more than $2.4 billion over the next 10 years, which with a cap on the discretionary budget would be paid by the opportunity cost of delivering benefits to veterans by the people we have doing that today. Not only is it expensive, it isn't needed to ensure effective delivery of benefits to veterans and service members. Our entire portfolio of benefits as it exists today is thriving. Last year, we had our best year ever. Despite challenges created by the pandemic, our dedicated staff showed resilience and flexibility in continuing to deliver for our veterans. Loan guarantees set new records, guaranteeing an all-time high 1.2 million loans worth almost $400 billion. VRE helped over 123,000 participants, developing more than 33,000 new plans that help veterans prepare for, find, and maintain suitable employment. Education processed over 3.5 million claims in record time, delivering nearly $12 billion in benefits for 875,000 veterans and beneficiaries. Insurance is paying claims faster than ever before, recently hitting an average of under 2 days. Our outreach efforts, even in the pandemic, touched almost 350,000 veterans, service members, and family members at over 6,500 events. We answered 3.5 million calls, dropping our time to answer from over 3 minutes to under 30 seconds. We helped over 213,000 transitioning service members get the best possible start to their post-military lives through awareness and access to benefits. So far this year, we've helped 41,000 in person and 35,000 virtually. And we continue to improve. This March, compensation marked its 4th highest month of rating production in history. Pension automation will produce over 100,000 extra decisions this year alone, which is about 3 months of work, almost instantly. And our Solid Start program just contacted our 100,000th recently separated veteran, ensuring early, caring, and consistent contact and seamless access to mental health and suicide prevention resources. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. My colleagues and I are prepared to respond to any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Good, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Frew. With that, I recognize myself for 5 minutes to begin the question portion of the hearing. And Mr. Frew, I will begin with you. Some of the testimony we received today on the Value-Added Homes for Veterans Act indicated concerns that taking energy efficiency reports into account during the mortgage underwriting process may further delay the already lengthy time it takes for securing a VA home loan. What steps is VA currently taking to improve processing times for VA home loans? And do you have any suggestions for how this proposal could be incorporated into those improvements?
A couple of thoughts on that, Chairman. As you might know, I ran the home loan program for many years when I was here. And one of the things that we tried to do, and we did very successfully over the years, is remove barriers and impediments to stop the private sector industry that delivers the benefit to veterans from participating. So anything that delays a home closing or adds steps or cost to lenders or servicers or other participants in the program, we wanted to remove. And one of the biggest concerns we have with this is it would require a change to a calculation for debt to income that just doesn't exist in the private sector. Most use 2 underwriting programs from Fannie or Freddie to underwrite a mortgage. This would provide an off-ramp to that would say, do something different for this subset. And as we see in a market that's very heated and very seller focused in this last year, anything that provides a detraction or a time delay would result in a negative outcome for a veteran. We would prefer something that could perhaps help improve a program that already exists, which is the energy efficient mortgage program, which I think is only for refinance loans today. And it's only for a maximum of $6,000. But if we could focus on something that wouldn't require changes to underwriting, but could be done in a way that would increase the amount that would allow a veteran to finance into the loan and decrease the impediments to the underwriting process, I think would be very helpful.
You noted in your written testimony that lenders might not be able to use existing software to underwrite loans that take energy efficiency reports into account. How might we incentivize software developers to incorporate this capability into their products?
That's a difficult question. I think making it as part of a VA home loan program is, while we absolutely support the intent of energy efficiency, necessarily draws a line around veteran borrowers trying to use their benefit. I think having something as a possibility for the entire market would take that line away and say, yes, we're participating in a broader movement that veterans as well as non-veterans can use as the overall mortgage market adopts underwriting standards and capability to incorporate that into their processes.
Thank you for that. You also noted that VA does not collect data on loans that are denied during the underwriting process. Does VA provide any assistance or outreach to determine how it can better meet the needs of veterans who are denied a home loan?
Well, the hardest part is what you mentioned at the beginning. There's a lot of veterans that apply for a loan, and their loans are underwritten through either desktop underwriter or loan prospector, and they're denied, referred, or they choose to go another route, a conventional route or HUD route. Veterans have a lot of options. If they get a VA loan, we know that they have access to the lowest interest rate for any national program in the country. But if they don't, we don't know that they applied for a VA loan because we don't have access to desktop underwriter or loan prospector. Back when I was in the program, we had talked about creating our own underwriting system for VA loans, much like USDA does. And that hasn't taken flight yet because it comes at a cost and comes at, again, a change in the mortgage industry that we try to work very delicately with to make sure that one of the only benefits VA is responsible for that we don't deliver ourselves doesn't get any gum in the works, so to speak.
Thank you for that. And in general, thank you for your feedback. I'm looking forward to working with you and your team. And hopefully VA can provide technical assistance to the committee to make the legislation workable and achieving this goal to expand veterans' access to energy efficient homes. And I look forward to working with you and your team on it. I'd now like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Moore, for his questions.
Thank you, Chairman Levin. Mr. Frew, thank you for your time. As I mentioned in my opening statement, this is kind of directed towards you. I'm pleased to see the VA is beginning to modernize their IT system for GI Bill claims processing. A little over an hour before this hearing this morning, the VA finally responded to our request and provided a cost estimate for the new digital GI Bill program. While we are still waiting for the full life cycle cost, I'm pleased with this development. Can you please confirm for us that the current estimate for this system and related expenses will cost the VA $837 million over the next 10 years?
I don't have the cost for the system in front of me, but I have Mr. Ruhlman here. James, are you aware of the estimated cost today?
No, I'm not. We would have to take that one for the record.
We can definitely get that for you, sir.
All right, no worries. And then I guess another question I got, and Mr. Frew, this will be for you as well. And you know, while I understand your concern about needing to support staff for the new fourth administration, it seems unrealistic that 812 more full-time staff would be needed to complete the work that is already being done by your current staff. This many new employees are almost as many employees that the VA has completing all home loan benefits nationwide right now. Is there anything in the legislation that would prevent you from transferring some of those 2,300 VBA staff that are already provided some of these management support functions to the new administration?
No, there's nothing in the legislation that prevents that. The reason we brought that up as a point is we have to recreate many things. So we have one CFO. We're going to create 16 new offices in the new administration, including finance, outreach, business information, things that exist today. We can't take one CFO and make two. We need to add people. And when you add people and a CFO has staff that do budget, has staff that do spending and do other particular discrete tasks, we need a certain base level at a minimum to recreate that in a new administration. So when we did our estimate for that, we came up with 800, what was it, 812 people, I think, in the administration, which you're right, is just 2 more than loan guarantee. But that's what we believe it will take to recreate those 16 functions in a new administration that all require executive leadership. And we also have field operations at 56 offices that will now have field operations for the Economic Opportunity Administration in 56 offices where veteran readiness exists, as well as other operational resources to operate those offices from the central office. And that's where the overhead comes in.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you please tell us why you think it's important to provide equity for in-state tuition benefits for students using the DEA program right now?
But we fully support the idea of equity for students in that program for in-state tuition because it provides parity with our other programs as well. We think it's an outstanding benefit. And in all honesty, reading some of the testimony from Ms. Haycock last night on the TAPS testimony for people who were impacted were a very poignant reminder of how impactful this is to a family, a person, which is why I joined VA in the first place and why we come to work every day to help.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member, and I'd like to now recognize my friend, Representative Trone, for his questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for holding this hearing. Mr. Frew, in regards to bringing registered apprenticeships to Veterans Education Act, the act was done by Rep. Norcross as an excellent piece of legislation. You state in your written testimony, the VA is going to need 18 months to make the necessary IT changes to implement this legislation. Can you talk a little bit about what the VA is going to do in the meantime to help get this information related to the registered apprenticeship program to our veterans and transitioning service members so we can be ready to roll? I think you're still on mute.
Thank you for that. After a year, you'd think we would get this right all the time. For the part on section 2, we defer to DOL completely on the information because we would require information from them. For the rest, let me ask Mr. Ruhlman from Education on his thoughts for the timing for how long this would take.
Thank you for that question. First, we're going to have to get a lot of that information from Department of Labor. We're going to have to identify the veteran service organizations and other organizations that serve veterans, find a place to store that data, and then make changes to a website, most likely our GI Bill comparison tool, in order to display that information. That would be part of the digital GI Bill program that we're currently working on. We do currently have in the GI Bill comparison tool information on DOL registered apprenticeships. So that is already out there, and we would begin adding those additional data elements as soon as possible as we can make changes to those systems as part of the digital GI Bill effort.
And you feel confident that's going to get the information out to our vets and those that are transitioning out of the service adequately?
Well, we can't, I would speak from my perspective, Mr. Trone, that we can't do enough outreach, getting information to especially transitioning service members, but any veteran that wants to access our benefits at the time that they need the information to make action on it is essential. And I think it requires a lot of touch points to give them the information. So yes, getting this information from various sources and making it available on a centralized website is great. Letting people know where it is even more important. And then letting them know multiple times where it is, so that when they do need to know it, they or a VSO or someone in their peer support network that will say, hey, I know exactly what you're trying to do. Here's where you can find the information. For them to know it is key. So that will take some time, but we're going to approach it from many, many fronts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman from Maryland for his questions. And if there are no further questions, we can bring this hearing to a close. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Thank the ranking member and all of our colleagues for all of this great legislation that they are introducing. All members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include additional materials. And without objection, I have a real gavel. This is not a virtual gavel, it's a real gavel. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. Thanks, everybody.